This is Nanda Devi, the second highest mountain in India. And while it is beautiful and majestic, it also hides a deadly secret. Because somewhere on this mountain, buried deep inside the snow, lies a device with enough radioactive plutonium to wipe out millions of people.
सब दब गए बह गए होंगे
तबाही भयंकर।
This is a story of how America teamed up with India in the 1960s to install nuclear-powered monitoring devices on the Himalayan mountains to spy on China from across the border. And this is the story of how they lost one of these deadly devices on top of Nanda Devi.
The device is not there. I repeat, the device is lost. Do you copy?
And it was never found again. And how they covered it up and hid it from the public. And this is a story of how in 2021, Nanda Devi herself started exposing this cover-up. Glaciers randomly melting in the middle of the winter, floods that came without warning, and a strange smell in the water. This is a story that everyone should be aware of because even today, that radioactive device lies somewhere on that mountain. Because if this lost plutonium has finally started leaking into the mountain and the snow, it will end up in the Ganga, a contamination that could wipe out millions of Indians. Over the past few months, I've been going over declassified government documents and historical accounts in an effort to reconstruct the story of a secret spy mission that went horribly wrong. And what I found was a truly horrific chain of events that has led to today, where a national disaster is just waiting to happen. Today, I want to tell you that story. My name is Tirthak Saha, and you are watching Under the Radar. This is a series that was made possible by the 01 network by Tirthak. In February 2021, a small village in the Chamoli region in northern India experienced a sudden flood.
सब दब गए बह गए होंगे
तबाही भयंकर।
And it was devastating. Now, floods are pretty common in the mountains of India, so journalists from around the country arrived expecting to cover a usual story. But as soon as they started talking to the villagers, they quickly realized that something was wrong. The villagers were convinced that this was not an ordinary flood, that there was something unnatural going on. Like how strange it was that an old glacier suddenly melted in the middle of the winter. Like how the flood waters had a strange, disgusting smell that was making it hard for them to breathe. Now, the reporters didn't believe the villagers at first, but as they started digging through the history of the place, a strange story started emerging. They learned that thousands of feet above the village, there was something deadly buried on the Nanda Devi peak. Something that has been there since the 1960s and has been steadily ticking away like a time bomb. 5 kilograms of radioactive plutonium. And it may have started leaking into the mountain, melting the glaciers and poisoning the water. Waters that flow into the largest river in India, one that feeds and sustains millions of Indians, the Ganga. These reporters had come to cover a story about a flood, but had accidentally uncovered a shocking story that started all the way back in the 60s during the Cold War. In the 1960s, there was a competition going on.
3, 2, 1.
It was between the US and the Soviet Union, and they were competing to see who could build the most number of nuclear weapons.
How many bombs do the Russians have? The exact number is not known.
And the prize for winning that competition was to become the world's #1 superpower. So yeah, it was a very tense time in world politics. Both countries were always on high alert, always thinking that they could be attacked at any minute by the other one, always trying to spy on each other, trying to figure out who was winning in that race.
I think we ought to realize in this country that we're in a Cold War and we better be in this war to win it.
And as if that wasn't bad enough, a third player joined in and said, hey, I want to compete too. In 1964, China detonated its first ever atomic bomb. And the world changed forever.
On Friday of last week, Communist China exploded a nuclear device on an isolated test site.
The Americans and the CIA suddenly went on red alert. Now that the Chinese had nuclear weapons, would they join forces with the Soviet Union? Was America suddenly facing a nuclear threat from two superpowers? They had millions of questions and they needed answers quickly. And so they asked the one question that was on everyone's mind. How could they spy on China without them finding out? And the CIA knew that no one could solve this problem better than this man, Curtis LeMay. Even if you don't recognize his name, I'm sure you know what he did. Curtis LeMay was the United States Air Force general who was responsible for the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Yep, those bombings. And in 1964, at a cocktail party in Washington, D.C., Curtis LeMay found the solution that they were looking for. And the solution was a man called Barry Bishop. Bishop was a very famous mountaineer and he had just come back from climbing Mount Everest. And at the party, he was excitedly telling Curtis all about his Himalayan adventures. But as he was telling a story of how beautiful the Tibetan plateau looked from the top of Mount Everest, Curtis LeMay suddenly had an idea. In that moment, LeMay realized that the best way to secretly spy on China would be to look down on them from the mountains across the border. Now, the only question that remained was which mountain? And how would the CIA get access to it? At first, the CIA considered putting the spying device on top of Mount Everest. I mean, it made sense. It was the tallest mountain, giving you the most reach, and American climbers already had a lot of experience climbing it. But this plan had two huge problems. Everest was too close to the Chinese territory and it was too famous. One slight slip up and the media would be all over it and the Chinese would immediately know that there was something shady going on. Plus, the Chinese could themselves access the mountain and steal that device with all that plutonium in it. But then Barry Bishop pulled out a map and started pointing out that the best high peaks with views into China were actually located in India. And the peak that was best suited for this mission would be Nanda Devi. Nanda Devi was relatively more remote, unknown, and it had a direct line of sight into China. And with India and China already fighting at the border, the CIA assumed that the Indians would also love to get some intel on their neighbors. And they were right. The Indian Intelligence Bureau agreed to help and a plan was jointly set into motion. Here's the plan in 3 simple steps. Step 1. Build a surveillance device that can actually survive in those harsh conditions. I mean, you can't just pop up there and change the batteries or recharge it, so it needs to be self-powered. And so they built a custom device with a small plutonium reactor powering it. By the way, this kind of a device is called a snap generator. It was mainly used by NASA on space missions during the 1960s. In fact, there's one on the moon. Okay, so 5 kilograms of plutonium-238, which has a half-life of 88 years. I mean, if it wasn't discovered or shut down or destroyed, this thing could have gone on to silently spy on China for decades and even centuries. Step 2. Assemble a team of elite mountaineers from both America and India and train them not only how to handle a nuclear spying device, but also how to stay undercover. In case they were caught, they were instructed to say they were scientists conducting a high altitude test or HAT. Actually, this was kind of an inside joke because the snap generator looked like it had a tiny hat on top of it, and so Operation HAT was born. Step 3. Find someone to lead the team. They needed someone fearless and fast, and they found the right man. Captain Manmohan Singh Kohli. He was an Indian Navy officer who held the record for the fastest climb to the top of Mount Everest while leading a team of 9 people. The CIA and the IB unanimously thought he was the perfect person to lead this team. With all the pieces in place, now the team had to train hard. The team was first taken to Harvey Point, a CIA base in America. There they were given fake names, identities, and a crash course in spying. Then they set up a training camp on top of Mount Denali, the highest mountain on the continent of North America. And here they practiced the mission again and again and again for weeks until every single detail of the mission was muscle memory. And finally, after months of planning, they were ready. Now all they needed to do was carry a 56-kilogram nuclear device 25,000 feet up into the Himalayan mountains. Should be easy, right? Nanda Devi is over 25,000 feet high and is considered to be one of the most dangerous mountains to climb. By 1965, only a few people had managed to climb it successfully and even fewer came back alive. Now imagine carrying a 56-kilo nuclear device up this mountain without anyone finding out. That's what this team was planning to do. The mission was simple: climb up, plant the device, activate it, and get down fast. And by October of that year, the team had managed to climb up to 24,000 feet. They were almost there. But just as they were at the finish line, the weather turned overnight, and a brutal blizzard slammed into them. Now here's a question for you. If you were the leader of that group, what would you do? Push forward and risk the lives of your teammates, or turn back and fail the mission? Captain Kohli bravely chose his men over the mission, and he ordered a retreat. But the problem was that in that weather, it was too risky to carry that heavy generator all the way back. So they left it there, hidden in the snow, planning to come back and retrieve it later once the blizzard had passed. But the weather had turned so bad that they were instructed not to go up again until the entire winter had passed. And so, a year later, they climbed again. But when they reached the spot, it was gone. I mean, just imagine, you're standing on a ledge 24,000 feet above sea level on top of a Himalayan mountain, realizing that you've lost a radioactive device containing one of the most dangerous substances known to man. What would you do? Well, the CIA and the Indian Intelligence Bureau decided to cover it up. Over the next 3 years, they sent more teams to search for it, but it was never found. Now, some theories say that spies from other countries found out about the mission, went up later and stole the device. Some say that the Indians actually kept it for themselves. But the most logical theory is that after that harsh winter, the device got buried deep inside the mountain, and it lies there somewhere even today. But even after the failure of this mission, the CIA wasn't ready to give up. 2 years after this, they tried again on another peak, Nanda Kot, and this time it worked. Signals were coming through and the device was transmitting perfectly, and the Americans celebrated. But then a couple weeks later, this device also went silent. And when they sent a team back up to check on it, they were horrified by what they found. The plutonium core in the generator had burned so hot that the device had melted through 8 feet of solid ice. Luckily, this time the team was able to retrieve it, deactivate it, and bring it back with them just in time, and a major disaster was avoided. But the CIA and the IB knew that if the world found out about these failures, it would be one of the biggest international scandals that they had ever faced. And so they covered it all up. Or so they thought. More than 10 years later, in 1978, a magazine called Outside dropped a bombshell. They published an article called The Nanda Devi Caper, revealing the entire secret mission. And the world was shocked. Indian citizens were furious. The then Prime Minister of India, Morarji Desai, was grilled in the parliament, and the CIA faced worldwide humiliation. But people quickly realized that the real nightmare is not the secret missions. It's the nuclear device that is sitting somewhere on Nanda Devi, a mountain that feeds the largest river in India, the Ganga. I mean, even today, children in Hiroshima and Nagasaki are born with genetic damage from the radiation that their grandparents were exposed to 80 years ago. Now imagine that kind of poison contaminating the Ganga, a river millions bathe in, drink from, and consider holy. A river that an entire country's agriculture and food production is dependent on. What started as a Cold War spy mission has now turned into a ticking time bomb in the Himalayan mountains. In 2021, after the Chamoli floods, when the locals were whispering about something unnatural hidden under the ice, were they wrong? Or had they unknowingly pointed towards a secret that the world was not ready to acknowledge? More than half a century ago, we humans, in our greed and fear and short-sightedness, decided to deface Nanda Devi. What if she decides to have her revenge?